Good evening and welcome to MBTv Debates, a joint endeavor between Macau Business Magazine and Rui Cunha Foundation. We are here at Rui Cunha Foundation. We were initially planning to hold this session with an on-site audience. However, due to the pandemic situation, we have moved the whole session online. We are here together with all of you watching us via Facebook, via Zoom, and joining us for this, we believe, relevant topic of paramount importance: growing green, global and regional challenges. This topic was, in fact, the cover story of our September edition of Macau Business Magazine. We have been collecting views, data, analysis from different points of view, different perspectives on such an important topic, which is, of course, will have to be tackled globally, but also regionally. In fact, a recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Ipcc, sounded the alarm over the effects of human-induced climate change. Tackling these challenges is a shared responsibility, as China aims at ambitious targets for peak emissions and also carbon neutrality. Macau is brought into the discussion, into the picture, in the context of the Greater Bay Area. And with some of the world's best practices being adopted just literally next door in the mainland, what can this city do to catch up and to wholly embrace the concept of ecological civilization? Well, this is a bigger question, and to help us provide some answers and also some views, perspectives on this, we are joined by a panel of distinguished experts to discuss the way forward. The way forward is precisely what we're looking at. And let me start by welcoming the guest speakers joining us. We have Christine Law, Chief Development Strategist of the Institute for the Environment of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Christine Law is also a former Undersecretary for the Environment at the Hong Kong SAR government. Also with us, we have David Gonçalves, Dean of the Institute of Science and Environment of University of St. Joseph in Macau. Benson Lam, COO of Macom Construction and Mercharging Macau, and Annie Lau, environmentalist, co-founder of Macau Waste Reduction and Recycling Campaign in the city. And without further delay and moving forward, welcoming you all, those of you who are joining us as participants via Zoom, please share with us your views, your questions for the panel. We encourage you to do so. And at this stage, we will be taking note of the first take of each one of our guest speakers. Joining me as a co-chair of this session is Nelson Moura. He's the editor-in-chief of Macau News Agency. Christine Law, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us. You have been looking at this matter, analyzing, studying from a global and regional perspective, joining us from Hong Kong. I'd like you to share with us your views on climate change and other environmental matters affecting us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just start with some very brief opening remarks. I'd just like to show a few slides so we can maybe all be on the same page. So please allow me to share my PowerPoint with you. So here we are. What I want to do is just talk about carbon neutrality. I think the world is focused on this, particularly when we move into the end of October and November. The world will be gathering at COP26. And so for the rest of this year, the world, including us in Hong Kong, China, and Macau, I hope there'll be a lot more discussion about how are we going to get there. So this is a very simple picture. And you can see from here the various areas of the world that have made some pledges. And you can see the bulk of the countries have pledged to be carbon neutral sometime between 2050 and 2060. So that, you know, you can get the majority of the countries here. I won't dwell on this, but I think it's quite good to kind of see who's actually made pledges. And of course, there are still quite a number of countries. And I believe if you count them all, there's probably still 70 countries that haven't actually put forward a pledge yet. Now, we are talking about Macau, Hong Kong, Greater Bay Area, and China. So I want to be able to fit in this narrative into China's bigger national plan. Now, carbon neutrality is really important, but there are two other very important national plans that actually will dovetail into the environmental sustainability and climate plan. Well, the first one is the China Dream. And our top leaders have already been talking about this. And of course, the China Dream means a much more ecologically a sound country. And this comes from, of course, many decades of very rapid growth where China has ruined many parts of the environment. So China now has a very clear mandate. It's actually in the party's constitution as well as in the national Chinese constitution of ecological civilization. And you can see from the phrasing that this isn't just one of the environmental policies. It isn't just about pollution control. It isn't just about waste management. It is actually lifting it to a much higher ideological level that development has to be ecologically sound. And only then will we be able to reconfigure China as China develops, that ecology will be very much part of the new civilization. And the other part that is very important to China is to lift people out of poverty, which China has achieved, at least at sort of the worst kind of poverty. And the next decades will really be about lifting more people out of poverty and also sharing the wealth that comes from development. So we have this new narrative now of common prosperity. And we can see a part of that has to do with regional integration. So in the South, we talk about the Greater Bay Area. If you're in the Shanghai or the middle of China, you have the Yangtze economic area and the Yangtze Delta area. And then of course, in the North, you have the Tianjin, Beijing area. So these areas are important policy areas for greater integration in order to achieve the Chinese dream, in order for us to collaborate to be able to achieve carbon neutrality, which is why I've called these the China development narrative. And carbon neutrality is a very important one. Now, of course, people say, well, what are we really talking about? And if I were to just make it really, really, really simple about the decarbonization side of the Chinese plan, there are actually 5 areas, but the 4 key areas that people normally talk about is to decarbonize electricity. That means moving away from coal, from oil, and from gas, where gas is a transition fuel, but we're basically going to ramp down fossil fuels and increase renewables, new energies, and the new technology has got to come into this. Then when we have cleaner electricity, we're also going to transform our industry and our transportation using cleaner electricity. And then, of course, everything's got to be much more efficient. In Hong Kong and in Macau, we are high density cities. That means people live in tall buildings, very, very dense. We're not very energy efficient. We're not very water efficient. So these are clearly areas that Hong Kong and Macau and the rest of China has to make very major improvements on. And then, of course, there is waste. Now, Hong Kong and Macau are small, but the Greater Bay Area still has a lot of industry and manufacturing. And if we look at this as a coherent whole, then the idea of circular economy, which is making much more efficient use of all natural resources, will be a key to transform our industry in southern China. And then my last slide is just to make the point that carbon neutrality for China, even achieving the carbon peak in 2030, is a revolution. I mean, just look at this. What China has to do to peak, right, in 2030, and then the dramatic drop to achieve carbon neutrality. It is a total revolution. It's a total revolution in government, in administration, in industry, in technology, and in the way you and I are going to live. So the main point I want to make here is we actually don't know how to do this, or the world doesn't know how to do this. But we have a date with destiny, right? In our first slide, we looked at how many countries are signing on to carbon neutrality between 2050 and 2060. This is a global date with destiny. And we are flying half blind, meaning, well, we haven't done it before. But the challenge is very great. So when we haven't done things before, and humans are quite clever, one way to help us is to cooperate. And cooperate means many people in government, in business, in society, we need to cooperate because it's about everybody making changes and adjustments to what we're doing. Now, I show a picture of the Greater Bay Area, the cooperation that our governments have signed with each other. And this is a foundation, or this should be a foundation for cooperation. So perhaps I can just end by saying, how can Hong Kong, Macau, on our own, we need to outreach to our industry and our society, but we must also find opportunities to come together, to co-learn and to share. So perhaps I can just stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Christine Low. What a great way to kickstart and to lay the foundations for our conversation, looking at the bigger picture and bringing us to the region, to the Greater Bay Area, to Hong Kong, to Macau. Bringing now David Gonçalves into the conversation. David, you are based in Macau. You have a perspective which, following Professor Christine Low, will be surely of great importance to provide us a view on where we are here in Macau and what are the benchmarks that we can look at. Please join us. The floor is yours, David. Professor David Gonçalves.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'd like to give my compliments to everyone else in the panel and that is following us through the different media. Now, maybe we should first take a brief look to go from global to more regional aspects to what were the main conclusions of the Ipcc as a sixth assessment report, because they do lay down a quite grim picture of climate change and what is happening to the world. So just to give you 2 or 3 highlights that some of the people that are listening may not know of. According to the data that is summarized in this report, the Earth's temperature has not been this high for at least 2,000 years. So before it has, for example, during the Jurassic period, it has been higher than this, but for the past 2,000 years, it hasn't. There is a very, very strong evidence, I would say almost irrefutable evidence, that this recent temperature increase is being caused by human action, by anthropogenic actions, in particular by the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So there was along the time a discussion whether this was being caused by human action or not. I think now we don't have many doubts about this. It is most likely being caused by action. The CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have been highest for the last 2 million years. Again, not historically so, but for a very long time they have not been this high. Sea level rise rate has been the highest for the last 3,000 years. And again, it has been higher in the past, but this trend we have not seen it since modern records. The Arctic sea ice area is the lowest in at least 1,000 years, and the glaciers retreat is also the highest in at least 2,000 years. So In this report, the panel, what they did was to calculate when we would reach the 1.5 degrees average degrees increase in the Earth temperature, and also the 2.5 degrees increase and the different scenarios of emissions. And the conclusion is that we will not be able to escape the 1.5 degrees increase, even if we cut down our emissions now very abruptly. We are not going to escape this, and somewhere between 2021 and 2040, we are going to reach this scenario with a possible decrease in Earth temperature only towards 2080. Again, we might escape the scenario of a 2 degrees increase, but this is only under a very low emission scenario. So only if the world as a whole is able to follow the plan that Christine has explained regarding the cutting down of the emissions, a very significant cut down of the emissions, is that we are going to be able to comply with this pledge. So regarding what are the consequences for this? There are many consequences for the way we live today, not only in Macau, but in the world in general. We'll have longer warm seasons, shorter cold seasons, increasing and more intense heat waves, including increased urban heat island effects in cities like Macau and Hong Kong, sea level rise, ocean deoxygenation and acidification, agricultural and ecological droughts in different parts of the world. This is the scenario that the panel assumes is going to happen in the near future because of these changes that are going on. So regarding Macau, Macau is of course a very small place, and the impact that we have in the world regarding emissions is also very insignificant, but we need to act also regionally if we want to change the picture globally. As you know, Macau is aligned with the target of China as a whole to peak carbon emissions by 2030. For the past 10 years, there has been a trend for carbon emissions to go up. This trend, not very extreme trend, but it has been increasing. For example, Macau has produced 1.3 million tons of CO2 in 2019, and this amount has decreased in 2020, mainly because of the pandemic situation that we are living. Although if we calculate the emissions per GDP, per unit of GDP, the GDP has fallen a lot in Macau, more than almost 60%, but the carbon emissions per GDP unit have increased nevertheless. So this means that the decrease was not just a consequence of, it was a consequence of a reduction in the economy, but not proportional to this reduction. So we are, in Macau, we produce or we release about 1.98 tons of carbon dioxide per capita per year. And this compares with about 5.9 for Hong Kong and 8.12 for mainland China, and to 4.5 for the world average. This means that Macau is slightly below all of these regions. And this has to do, of course, with the fact there's not much energy production in Macau and not much industry in Macau. But for the emissions that we do produce, they are coming mostly from the production of electricity, from land transportation, incineration of solid waste, and then domestic emissions. The electricity production and land transportation are the two major issues regarding emissions in Macau. And so maybe we should focus on these ones if we want to tackle the problem of emissions here in Macau. And I would say not just in Macau, in the world as well. Of course, the electricity that we consume here in Macau, 90% of it is imported. We only produce 10%, and the 10% that we produce is actually from the burning of fossil fuels or natural gas, and 3% from the energy recovery from solid waste incineration. This means that if we did account with the carbon emissions from all the electricity and the energy in general that Macau imports, of course, the responsibility of us citizens of Macau for the emissions is not that low. We would probably be more comparable to what is happening in mainland China. It's just that we are calculating the emissions on the other side of the border because we are importing the energy here, but actually we are the ones responsible for that energy production and so for the emissions. Just to try to wrap it up, we should experience in Macau for the past, for the coming years, more intense but not as frequent typhoons, according to some modeling, a higher frequency of heavy rain events, a sea level rise increase, and so the sea level rise rate has been increasing in this region for the past decades. It means that it's been increasing and increasing at a higher rate for the past decade, and under a scenario of a high emission scenario, the sea level rise can be somewhere between 1 and 6 meters, depending on whether you integrate the coastal flooding or not here in the region. And so it's possible that by 2100, several parts of Macau, Hong Kong, and mainland China will be underwater, and this will affect millions of people. So I would just try to put into the discussion, I would not take more time, but I would put into the discussion that the issue of climate change is interconnected with a number of other environmental issues. It's interconnected with energy production and air pollution. It's interconnected with the green areas and biodiversity. It's interconnected with the food that we consume and the diet habits that we have. It's interconnected with the consumption patterns, and in particular on whether we use a more linear or more circular economy. It's interconnected with the health of the oceans and how we are going to manage the resources that we have in the oceans for our well-being. So I would not tackle all of these because they are quite complex issues, but just to give you an idea that when we talk about a climate emergency, I think this is kind of misleading. I believe we should be talking about an environmental emergency because that's where we are. The climate emergency is one aspect of a multidimensional problem related with the way we are treating our planet, and that I would describe it, I think, as an environmental emergency. And so I believe we need to take a more holistic view on the topic of environmental problems and not focus just on one set of problems. Even if we just focus on climate change, yeah, we are going to be able to alleviate a number of other issues, but not all. I believe we should have a more integrative view on what are the environmental challenges ahead. So I would leave the part of the solutions, what to do in the world and what to do in Macau, for the debate. Let me just add one topic because Christine also mentioned it, and I think it's very important that we need to understand what are the drivers of this environmental emergency. How did we get here? And if we think about it, we probably will link this into a famous formula from the 70s that links to, well, we are a lot of people in the world. Population has been increasing for the past decade, century. Our consumption rates have been going high. We are demanding more from the planet and extracting more from the planet. And we have consumption patterns which are linear, not circular. And inequality is extreme. This means that rich countries are able to adopt certain technological solutions that poor countries are not. And until we solve this, until we solve the issue of population numbers and inequality in the world, it's going to be difficult to tackle climate and environmental problems. So I would just leave my intervention here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David Gonçalves. This highlights the interconnectivity and how intertwined all these matters are. Professor David Gonçalves was talking about sea level rising and the impact in the future. And I'd just like to share with you an artwork by Ricardo Lima that we published in our edition of Macau Business Magazine, where you can see kind of this is just downtown Macau, what might look like sea level rising here in the city, just for us to kind of picture that that gives us a bit of a sense of what may come if we don't act fast. And also, in many ways, or in some ways, we're talking also about mitigation. So it has to be something coordinated in many ways. And we need governments, we need scholars, scientists, and also companies, of course. Let's listen from Benson Lam, COO of Macau Power and Construction and Mer Charging, to take a look at, to have a view from the private sector, from companies, from the businesses dealing with green technologies. And just a note on Mer Charging is deeply involved in installing electrical vehicles charging systems in the city. Benson Lam, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will, from my point of view as a commercial company, share my experience on what we are doing in Macau. Okay, I share the slide. Actually, as a commercial company, we also do something. We hopefully do something for Macau or for the panel. I will share what we are doing in our company doing in Macau. Actually, at the beginning, we are a construction company, but we also do a lot of the building, the building management system to minimize the efficiency to use the power. And also, we build a lot of the solar panel system in Macau, in a lot of the casino, and now even the government building. A large scale we are doing. Also, we do some trial demo to the government. Hopefully, we can have a more clear the power. And also, we do a lot of the power station. I use the power station to share the power to the city. Because of our construction, the experience, and then now we are doing our new business at the sector. We are calling it the EV charger. Actually, the EV charger is not a very, very final and very clean energy, but it's much better than the traditional what we are using. Actually, we have two major of the system for the EV charger. One is the core, is the fair charging, and also the other is the sequential charging. We hopefully use our charging system to help our city to do something, but efficient to do it, and minimize the power. And also, our company just a few days ago, formal in the Guangdong. In Guangdong, we call the electrical scooter the battery replacement. Actually, this this scooter is very, very popular in Guangdong, but in Hong Kong, in Macau, nobody uses it. In Macau, also a lot of the motorcycle. Actually, to my point of view, motorcycle is more efficient than the personal car. But everybody, most of the people, not use the car. But this is not the way for the panel. What we face the problem in Macau or in Hong Kong or even in the Great Bay Area, the other city, when we promote the EV charging market. In here, we can see some existing building. This is the sample in Macau. Most of the building, actually, they only have the power to service the existing functions, because the EV charger is a new issue. Most of the building without this the facility. That means if we need to charge at home, we need to install more chargers. This picture shows if we additional install one power cable, we save 100 amps. We only have 9 chargers. But if we use our system, we call the loading management system, we can increase to total 81 chargers with the same power consumption. That means if we can reduce our infrastructure to provide more charge, this should be very, very helpful to our city. But also in Macau, the government have very, very clear the procedure to help the end user to apply the charges. But basically, they have a procedure, but the procedure is not work because not so many people can successfully to apply the charge at home. Why I'm talking most of the time, I'm talking about the charge at home because we hope that everybody can charge the vehicle at home because this can how to say, to save the energy, because a lot of the public fast charge is a lot of the waste, about 30% of the energy waste. And Macau actually is a very, very small city. And what we can do for the world or for the planet, actually, a lot of the people were talking about Singapore. Singapore actually do a lot of the things to damage to the world. But Macau, because it's very, very small, we do not have a lot of the technology. But as we talking about the risk, if we do some demo works in Macau, actually it's a very, very low risk. If it is successful to use this the method, and then we use the other Greater China areas cities, this maybe we can help other cities to provide some solutions. As in Macau, we do just talking about, we do a lot of the solar panel in the casino, and then we're now doing some solar panel for the car park. We hopefully have this whole system. First, we generate the clear power, and then we also think about how we stop it, to store it. That we need to have a energy store solutions. Our company work with the Ipcc, a Portuguese company. They have a very, very good energy store solution. That means can combine together and provide clear energy. Even now in Macau, you see this picture. Actually, this is the new picture in Macau, Taiwan. But why we don't build a lot some solar panel on top of this one and generate the clear electricity for the light, the post to use, and also this is the quota strip. This quota strip in here, we also can install a lot of the solar panel, and also we can build a new the cover walkway to produce more the energy. And here this picture is the university. Actually, university is a very, very new building. We should and we can use a lot of the trial to do some demo to Macau, and then demo in Macau, and then share to our city. This is the final the picture is the electrical scooter that we just using in Guangdong. Actually, I believe this system is very, very suitable for Macau, since Macau is a very, very small city. Actually, the problem Macau is very, very small, but the benefits is small. That means we can very, very suitable to use the electrical scooter or electrical vehicles. This basically what I'm talking about, what we are doing in Macau. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benson Lam. Thank you for sharing with us some of the solutions, highlighting some obstacles, and also the technology that is already available or missing both here and basically just across the border in Guangdong province. Some good practices that are already available here in Macau in terms of EVs. The figure is pretty low. Figures from July were pointing to about 2,000 electrical vehicles in town. So there's a lot to catch up in many ways with regards to Macau. Benson Lam was pointing out that Macau is small. Small may be good, small may be beautiful. How about clean? Annie Lau, you have been involved in the number of campaigns, and I was talking about how everybody's contribution is relevant, that of course governments, scientists, companies, and the civil society, that's where you've been looking at things. I'd like you to share with us your views on the matters that we've been discussing, and also perhaps share your own experience in terms of what's been achieved over the past decade, what is yet to be done, and why Macau is lagging behind in some ways, and what can be done to move things forward.
Yes. Thank you so much. First, I would like to share my PowerPoint on the screen. When we talk about climate change, we cannot forget in the region of Macau, every year we have typhoon. And in 2017, we have super typhoon, Hato typhoon. And I feel like this typhoon really make a lot of impact in the society, and then waking up the society as like feeling the impact of global warming. So as you can see from the PPT slides, you know, when we're talking about climate change, we cannot forget about the economic loss by the natural disasters. So when you see the super typhoon have a huge impact on Macau society in terms of the economic loss, so you can see like a company or the economy lost like, you know, over like millions of dollars. So that is quite a lot of money. And then also not talking about the economic loss, and we cannot forget about people dying. 10 people dying from Hato. So it is a really serious things in Macau. And I guess from this disaster, people wake up, you know, pay attention to the environmental issue and the impact, and start to thinking about how can we as an individual to reduce our carbon footprint to combat climate change. As you can see, the powerful image that I share on the slides, you know, when after the typhoon Hato, we have a lot of garbage on the street. And, you know, it really make us like, wow, how come we have so much garbage and waste after the typhoon and all the things that was out of our imagination. So, okay, one issue in Macau is the waste pollution, right? And then as you also mentioned about the air pollution, and also a very obvious issue in Macau. But I want to narrow down, especially for the waste problem in Macau, and in terms of like a recycling issue. So actually, in 2018, I read a book called National Geographic. So it have a cover called "Plastic or Planet." So the book actually mentioned each year human actually dump 18 million tons of plastic in the ocean every year. So it is just the tip of the iceberg. So by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than the fish. So, and then when I read about this title, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like, how could we human end up in, you know, making this such a, like a great, enormous pollution that seems like cannot be resolved. So, and then I start to do research on Macau, especially on the waste pollution side. So next slide, please. So in 2000, actually this year, the Environmental Protection Bureau released a report. Especially highlighting the waste in Macau. So I would say Macau is really a champion of waste generating waste compared to nearby countries or regions. So in Macau, per person per day, we generate 1.74 kilo of waste. That means for the whole year, we generate over 440,000 tons of waste. That is very high compared to nearby regions like Singapore, Hong Kong, Zhuhai, Beijing, and Shanghai. Over the decade, 2020, that was the first year that Macau dropped the waste reduction. mainly because of the COVID. We got less gas. So by the first time in 2020, 20% decrease. But not to mention that even though that 20% decrease, it still make Macau the top for the waste generations. So when you nail down to see the waste component, the first one is food waste, 30.5%. The second is paper, and then the third is plastic. So paper 27.2%, plastic 20.1%. So the amount are quite significant, those top three waste items. And then when you look at the recycling rate, our recycling rate is very slow in the city, only around 19.5%. And then when you look into plastic, so it's super low, 0.14%. That is equivalent to 125,000 kilo. So that is very low. So as you can see, we have a waste issue in Macau, and also we are we live in a coastline region, so we are very subject to climate change and sea level rise. So a lot of things that we will have an impact on from climate change. So I guess as an individual or in the community, we have to work together with the government, with the society, to to be more green in our city. So later on, I will mention about solution that what we can do as an individual and in the society and as a community as a whole in Macau. How can we be more green, live a green lifestyle, things like that. Thank you. That's my sharing. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Annie, for sharing your experience in promoting more environmental awareness in the city. And I wanted to maybe segue to a question to Christine, because in many senses, Hong Kong and Macau share a lot of their issues in terms of environmental protection and awareness. They're both small cities, obviously Macau much smaller, but they both share the same problems in terms of almost the same levels of waste production per capita, and in terms of lack of space to treat that waste. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of what you've seen of successful policies that have been advanced by Hong Kong authorities in the latest years to try to solve some of those issues, maybe in cooperation with Zhuhai, nearby provinces, how some of those policies could be applied in Macau because of some of the shared characteristics. Thank you.
Well, maybe, I mean, Hong Kong produces about 5.6 million tons of municipal solid waste a year. I think that was the figure for 2019. But maybe I can point to the areas where we have cooperation in the region, including between Hong Kong and Macau, where we've been most successful. And then we can look at the areas where, if we were to go forward, how can we collaborate better? So I think the one where we have collaborated the best on is air quality. Because we had a very long history on this, and Hong Kong has a whole variety of measures. And in fact, we were the first to propose to clean up marine emissions, which ended up actually changing the national policy in China. And between Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, we also have quite an elaborate air monitoring station system. So there's been long years of cooperation. So that's very good. That's the kind of thing that we can look forward to. Annie talked very passionately about waste and waste in our waters. Again, this is an area where Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong must cooperate together. The reason is upstream in the Pearl River, that's where a lot of waste, if it's not properly managed, of course, it comes down to Hong Kong and Macau. Now, we ourselves generate a lot of waste. And because of some of these typhoons and flooding that we've all experienced, I think we all know that if we have passionate NGO activists who've gone out on beaches, right, to kind of look at where the waste may have come from. And so I think if we were to work regionally to think of how to identify where waste comes from and to work upstream, our authorities can actually jointly, I think, do things that we haven't done before. Now, of course, one of the issues here is, one country, two systems. So I think our mainland colleagues are very reticent to say, oh, well, we're not telling you what to do, but there's a difference to saying we tell each other what to do and cooperation. So I think in the waste area, that's possible. And then, of course, the other thing that we've already talked about is water and energy in buildings. You know, these are areas, I think, where the national government wants to do better. I think the Macau government and the Hong Kong authorities want to do better. This is, and we have lots of professionals, right? You know, we have lots of professionals in the building sector. This is one of those perfect areas where if we wanted to join hands to find ways to collaborate, set targets, right? You know, the thing is not just to talk about it, but to say, in 3 years, we want to do this. In 5 years, we want to do this. So that by the 6th year, you know, we could say, well, you know, have we reached the target or not? So there are lots of opportunities. Food waste. Food waste is another one where we can cooperate, right? And I think our citizens, our residents are kind of ready for it, but I can imagine that we can actually have GBA campaigns, you know, where our hotels and our restaurants, right, how we collect waste and so on, that everybody could actually pull together. Can we think of a campaign, a region-wide campaign that we can roll out in the next 5 years? It'll be great. It'll be great. It'll bring us all also closer together.
I thanks Christine a lot for the for the call for cooperation, obviously between Macau, Hong Kong, and Guangdong. And I wanted to also ask Benson, because obviously Macau is involved in construction projects, and as David mentioned, construction is one of the main sources of carbon emissions that Macau produces. And I wanted to have your take on how the construction sector can maybe reduce those emissions. The government in Macau has talked about using prefabricated methods to maybe make constructions speedier and more sustainable. And in your experience in this area, what do you think are the steps that maybe can be taken to reduce some of that carbon footprint in the sector?
Actually, we totally agreed now the government have a lot of tender, a lot of construction, they prefer use the prefab. Actually, our company also do a lot of the prefab constructions, such as structural steel. Actually, prefab is two kinds of the prefab effort. One is the traditional, we use a lot of the years prefabrication steel structure. The other is the prefabrication RC structure. RC structure that's like traditional or the building. And now we just have in our just one government project that usually we say the Lot P. Lot P is the housing project. The government now require for the prefab. Actually, to the city, or we all agree we need to propose this new method, but unfortunately, our Macau know the budget to even in Hong Kong, most of the elements we need to prepare from the mainland China, but this is a very, very good way to build our city use the prefab system. I'm happy this one to reduce the people working in the city.
Thanks a lot, Benson, for your sharing your experience. And we also have a lot of questions from some of our viewers. We have a question from André Antunes for David, because he mentioned, he's asking if, since a lot of the energy that comes from the fact that Macau depends so much from Guangdong and other regions, a lot of the energy is imported, a lot of the materials and products are imported, could have more locally produced products and energy reduce those carbon emissions, and should this be promoted more in Macau?
Just unmute here. Well, thank you, and thank you for the question of André. Yeah, I think Christine mentioned a very important aspect, which is the aspect of regional cooperation to tackle these issues. And many of the environmental problems of Macau are very difficult to face if we don't cooperate with nearby regions. And I think that the Great Bay Area strategy is a very good opportunity for Macau to finally be able to improve in the environmental performance in many of these aspects. Energy, of course, is one of them, we talked about that this is the main driver behind carbon emissions worldwide, not just in Macau, and that Macau imports 90% of the energy. So whatever happens in the other side of the border with the energy production companies that Macau is buying energy from is going to have a direct impact in our environmental performance. I would say that Macau, I'm not very well aware of what have been the steps put forward by the local government and how this cooperation has been developing. But I would say that Macau has an obligation to cooperate and to put the resources that it has in action and in favor of the development of clean energies. Probably not in Macau, because Macau is very small and the capacity that we have to develop clean energy here is very limited, according to several studies. We would not be able to be sustainable from an energetic point of view in Macau, but we can and we should cooperate, and we should invest the money of Macau in developing these kind of solutions. And this is true for everything. This is true for solid waste management, is true in terms of biodiversity and creating corridors where fauna and flora can live together in such a dense environment that we have here with human development. And so I would say that we can do things locally. One of the things we should be doing is improving energy efficiency and reducing our consumption. Macau per capita has an energy consumption which is approximately double the energy consumption of mainland China, and it's also higher than the one of Hong Kong. So we can do more, or we should be doing more, to reduce the energy that we consume per capita. And this is something that we should also be aware of. In some parts of the world, the energy consumption per capita is decreasing. For example, in many European countries, it has been steadily decreasing for the past years. It means that when you reach a certain level of development, and when you put the technology in favor of these issues, you are able to start going on a descent trajectory. Now, the challenge for China, of course, for the whole of China, is that the average energy consumption per capita is still very, very far away from what an European or someone in the United States consumes. And so it will be very, very challenging, I would say, extremely challenging for China to, but I think they can do it, for China to cope with the emissions pledge that they signed in the Paris Agreement, and at the same time be able to develop the country in the direction that we all want the country to develop. And so this will be very, very challenging, but at the same time, it opens opportunities in China, in Macau, in Hong Kong, for people to come up with ideas and develop new technologies and new solutions for this kind of problems. And of course, we also talked about going circular, and Annie has been fighting against all this massive production of solid waste in Macau. When we go to the shoreline here in Macau, is really sad to see all the waste that is coming from the Pearl River and all the plastic that ends up in the ocean. And of course, one of the solutions for this is going circular, is to try to come up with solutions that decrease the amount of things that we need to produce. And there are very good examples of this going on in Macau that can be an example to other parts of the world. We have some studies going on in our university together in partnership with some of the local resorts, where we are doing life cycle analysis and thinking about strategies to decrease, for example, plastic usage or single plastic usage in those facilities. And the solutions are there. They might not be the ideal solutions, but they are already much better than what we have now. So going circular is another thing that Macau should and could do. And of course, we need to have also to think about whether we need more top-down measures, things related, for example, with the polluter pay principle, whether this would work or not in Macau, and also bottom-up action like the ones that NGOs do, and the ones that we can do in our houses when we educate our children for these questions. So I believe we need, again, to have an holistic approach to these matters, and to use all the weapons we have to tackle these issues.
I think one of the things we have to do, if I can cut in, is we've got to make, we've got to make things that people think is negative, we've got to make it cool. So, I mean, we have a great hospitality business, right? And you have an enormous hotel and hospitality business as well. And in fact, the normal way that hotels and restaurants think about is, give you everything that you want. If you want to stand in the shower for half an hour, that's fine, This is not going to be the way to go in the future if we are serious about achieving net zero. So how can we think about this? So rather than, coming and saying, we're going to restrict everything, when you come, we're not going to wash your bed sheets, we're not, you're not going to do this, not going to do that. I think we got to make it cool. So, I mean, just imagine today, right? You go to a restaurant and, we have great restaurants in both Macau, Hong Kong, and in Guangdong. And, you can make, I mean, the menus are up to the restaurants. So if they already don't feed people with endangered species, right? Well, that's great. Secondly is portions, right? And, again, creating menus that are closer to eating regionally. We're not going to drink water that comes from Norway. We're not going to fly in blueberries, from Sweden. What can we do locally? And just look at Singapore, right? 30% by 2030 of their nutrition is going to come locally. I mean, that's really funky. And I've been saying in Hong Kong, can we think about that? What is it that we would have to do, right? If we have to think that way. And then you can blend in all the health and well-being and stuff, make it really cool. The other thing I want to do is, can we, in our hotels, right, including at home, social justice in the world means rich people like us cannot just waste all the resources. Can we imagine that we are going to take 3 minutes to shower, all of us? And if you use more than 3 minutes, you're going to have to pay much more, right? I mean, make this cool so that regionally, when people come here, they don't think of deprivation. They want to come and have that experience. Why not, right? So this is the sort of thing where business, where civil society, we can really help. Sorry, I'm a bit, passionate about this.
We want passion from our speakers.
That's right.
To motivate them. And it's a very interesting point, because we're talking basically in the buffet city of Asia in a time where President Xi is advancing with policies to reduce food waste. So it's always interesting to see how the hotel industry would follow. And we have also one question from one of our viewers, from Mr. Carlos Noronha, which is talking about the fact that food waste has the pay principle for people having to pay for the waste they produce took a long time to get into the agenda in Macau. And obviously, Annie has been fighting for quite some years to raise awareness in Macau for the issue of plastic waste. And we've seen the Macau government advance with fees for plastic bags in supermarkets, and now they already passed regulations to cut the imports of styrofoam boxes from tapao boxes or from the one-use-only utensils. And we wanted to use that to ask you about what do you think are the most effective ways to raise awareness in people on how they change their behaviors, and also to talk to the government and get them to get these issues into the agenda?
Yes, thank you for your questions. So let me start how I got started the campaign in Macau back in 2018. As I mentioned before, I really have like huge impact from the typhoons in 2017, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I need to do something about it, because I just can't wait here and then do nothing, and the world's in a mess. So in 2018, I met a group of like-minded people, and we share ideas like, oh, let's make a petition, let's make it online, because nowadays everyone shares things on the internet, right? Social media, is a cool thing now. They do hashtag and all the things, they share things online. And we thought it would be a very cool idea to share it on social media. So we create a petition on change.org, urging the government in Macau to ban single-use plastic in Macau. So the focus is on the waste issue in Macau, and then especially particularly on plastic pollution. So we launched a petition in 2018 in August, and surprisingly, in 2 weeks, we got over 4,700 signatures online and offline. And until now, the petition got over like 10,000 signatures. And in September, we submit the petition to the government. After a few months, we sat down with the director of DSPA, the Environmental Bureau in Macau. So he was saying that, oh, you guys did a good job to raise awareness. We are not against banning single-use plastic, but we need to wait until the ideal situation is suitable for banning single-use plastic in Macau. So, and then, we can't wait, right, for the government to take action. So as a citizen, I believe we have power to take action by our individual, actions, and as a whole, I think we can make a big impact. So from then, we are nonstop. We didn't want to stop because, and then so on. My Naimative friends also believed that we should not stop. And then in 2018, October, we started another social media campaign called No Plastic Please, targeting on the supermarket. They use a lot of single-use plastic wrapping on fruits and vegetables that is not necessary. So we make a campaign on social media to raise awareness and to pledge that, to urge the supermarket not to wrap fruit and vegetables with unnecessary packaging. Or if we cannot avoid, give us an option to recycle, those unnecessary packaging, for example, like, those blueberry containers, strawberry container, those containers that can be recycled. So over a month, we have like over 600 photos that share on social media that really bring a lot of awareness online, and especially towards those young people. We found out that young people are very into going greens and really supporting these ideas. And then later on, we didn't stop, as I mentioned. So we start to look at the public recycling bins in Macau on the street. And they are all messed up and not being properly recycled because they are all contaminated. People in Macau, they do want to recycle, but they found out that they cannot trust the public recycling bins in Macau because when we look at it, it just looks like a normal general waste bin. So how can we, trust this system because it's not working properly? So, and then in 2019 February, we set up a local resident-run recycling campaign called Macau for Waste Reduction. So since then, we have one station, right? Once a month, we do recycling on the street to teach the public how to do clean recycling. And then later on, we have 6 stations now. Since that we, have collected 6 tons of recyclable items. So yeah, that's what I want to say, because as an individual, we can make a difference. Either that you create a recycling station, or you're helping spread awareness on social media. That really helped. So that's what I want to share. I mean, everyone can make a difference. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Annie, for sharing your experience in the last years. And we also have a question from Maria Freitas. And she asks that she's an architect herself that is involved in urban planning. And she says that she believes that the government needs to work in cooperation with the region and to promote the need of energy charts for any new buildings. And that all the departments should be involved in promoting this. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to reach these climate goals. So I just want to open to the panel if anybody wants to share their position on how all the government departments can work together to promote how new buildings use energy and reduce their energy use.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first because this is something I worked on when I was in government, and currently I'm still working with people in the built environment sector, who want to promote much greener buildings. Energy and water are so fundamental to how we live. And I don't think our governments kind of have really gotten it yet, that this is something where good policy can go a long way. In Hong Kong, for example, water is supplied by the government. So this is, they have all the data. So there are big things that can be done, like where's the wastage, right? So if you have to amend pipes and so on to save water, that's a public expense. But we also know where are the households, where are the buildings that have problems. But the government has not always been very aggressive in going after those people that are not mending their pipes. And in terms of promoting public education to get, you have to raise water price. In Hong Kong, water is too cheap. I don't know what it is in Macau. So again, we need to change this entire attitude as to what should be expensive. And of course, politically, people are very concerned because water is also something that we need every day. So there's always one argument to say, well, we don't want to make it too expensive because then the poor people won't be able to afford it. But nobody has really thought about how you would develop a system where you use pricing to really deter people from wastage. And certain, commercial should be more expensive. So I think we've had a lot of avoidance in really looking at energy and water. And I would say if we're really serious about net zero, this is just what all city authorities have to do.
And I don't know if anybody has anything to add on this issue. Okay. We also have Carlos Noronha also actually wanted to extend this question on terms of the Sustainable Development Goals disclosure. He's asking if the speakers believe the government should make reporting Sustainable Development Goals necessary for large-scale private and public companies, and if this disclosure could perform a verification and audit function. So maybe companies should be kind of motivated to report how they are developing their company into a more sustainable direction. If anybody wants to posit on that.
Are they talking about SDG or ESG?
The SDG.
Because they're, I know it's SDG, but it's two different systems. So in Hong Kong, listed companies on the stock exchange now have to report on ESG. And, that's actually going to take some years to, for companies to do well on that. SDG is a reminder from the UN to, in a way, policymakers, first of all, that their policies need to consider all 17 sustainable development goals. In terms of, I think, to be honest, I think in Hong Kong, it's going to be more pressing on ESG rather than SDG, because that's already a big enough change for the time.
And we also have a question from Ruby Mang. She asked if any of the speakers could share some light on why it was not idly communicated or adopted by the public and private organizations, the Sustainable Development Goals. And maybe we could direct this question to David on maybe since you're closely working with the USJ, and how do you choose to promote? How do you promote the Sustainable Development Goals to the students of the university, and how to raise their awareness about these issues?
Well, that's a very good question. I would say that at the University of St. Joseph, we have been taking very significant step forwards into integrating the SDG in the management of the university. Just for you to give you an idea, there is very strong incentives for scientific production to be linked to SDGs now in our university. This means that when we are thinking about research projects and even research publications, we need to consider, or we should consider, whether they fit within the UN SDGs, and we should actually have in the papers specific keywords and topics that go along with the SDGs of UN, and this is a driver for research in the universities to go in the direction of coming up with studies and solutions and know-how that then can be transferred into companies, and that they may be adopting it and leading to societal changes. This is one part. Other part of it is that this is also conveyed to students, not to all students from all degrees, so that we have these kind of core modules that all students take in all degrees. And one of these modules, we tackle the list of SDGs and the particular actions that all of us can take into improving them. So this is relatively recent in USJ, but we're going to see a lot more of it in the coming years. This is for USJ, but let me also say that I believe there are very good examples here in Macau in the private sector, not just in the governmental sector, but also in the private sector, in particular in companies, in big companies that we have here in Macau, these big resorts and so on, that have to improve their sustainability performance on an annual basis, because they're stockholders and people who have a little bit of the company put pressure on them for them to have a better environmental performance, not just because this may be economically more efficient for the company if you are able to save energy or save water or so on and so forth, but also because they need to have an image to convey, and they need to do regular improvements on these aspects, in others as well, but on these aspects as well. So this is why I think SDGs have also been incorporated that I am aware of in at least 2 or 3 of the largest resorts here in Macau, and they are part of the environmental management systems that the companies have implemented. So I think they are good tools because they allow the companies to draft policies, take action on them, and then review the data and see whether things are working or not, and take new action if needed. They are not enough per se, but they are good drivers of change. So things are happening in Macau, maybe not so fast as we would like, but they are happening.
Professor David Gonçalves, you're talking about linking this to this idea of corporate social responsibility from the businesses, and I'd bring Benson Lam into the conversation now with regards to this need for companies to portray themselves as good corporate citizens, not only as a sort of PR stunt. We're talking about, it's like combining, of course, being good citizens in a society with having some good PR, some good image. You have been dealing with these companies, providing all your services. What do you see in this respect? Do you see a big improvement? What would be necessary for more businesses to truly embrace these technologies? Is it only a matter of investment, money, or is there something else needing?
Actually, how to say, I would like to share more the update of the due to my English the language problem, my company. We the company we do a lot of the things. We need to do a lot of the environmental works, such as now we are doing the EV charge the works, and not the big business in Macau, but we really want to do something for Macau. On the other hand, we also have our goal to do something now at the EV charger in Macau, not the big market, because a lot of the people still use the traditional, but we want to, in future, have a system, have a software, have a control. Some people have car park. Is it possible to share to the other board that we want to invest the software to control everybody? Sometimes we work at, we're working at the, go out to working, but my personal car park speed. If we have a car park system, can we share to the other body that we hopefully now we invest something in future, but this is a long, long way to go. This is my point. And also our company also do something not because of the money. For some new building for the casino, a lot of people complaining the casino use a lot of the energy. We provide some solution help the casino how to reduce or efficient to use the energy. And also, I really want to share some very, very angry case in Macau. Some EV electrical car they using. Actually, because in Macau now the government, a lot of the station is free for charge. That means a lot of people, because this is free of charge, during the charge they will inside the car, open the conditioning and watch their movies for 1 hour, 2 hours. That's what some people doing in Macau. This is my just sharing some point because I'm not a professor. I'm not too much the data to share to everybody.
But you're sharing something that you have firsthand experience or you've seen. That's an interesting point. Before we wrap up, I'd like to bring briefly into the conversation. And since we're talking about regional integration, earlier this month we had the announcement of the master plan for the development of the Guangdong Macau in-depth cooperation zone in Hanchin. How to get this right in terms of environmental cooperation and having a holistic view on bringing about a sustainable Macau Hanchin integrated urban area. What are your expectations? What do you think of this? I'd like you to briefly share a bit of your take on this. Perhaps I can start with Annie. From the civil society perspective, what are your expectations on going green when it comes to cooperation with Hanchin?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I would like to highlight the recycling issue in Macau. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of waste and a lot of things don't get recycled. One thing I want to highlight is the policy in China is getting stricter than stricter. For example, like our recycling paper is getting more strict, plastics the same. And then also when we talk about recycling, not to mention that we have challenges behind. For example, the labor cost in Macau, the land, we have lack of land. We don't have like massive land for recycling because when people do recycling, they need space to storage for the recyclable items, right? And then the policy of exporting and importing, public awareness of clean recycling, very important also. We need to work together on this. Like regionally, like Hanchin or China, they have lands, right? Or Macau need to provide land that for recyclable items and for recycling, and then also for the industry. Create green jobs. Make people to work in the industry. Providing jobs, make green economy. Education from school is also very important. Start from the school, educating the kids how to do clean recycling. Make everyone to do it. And from the government level, government have the responsibility to make law, to push forward together as a society, to make everyone recycle, to think about our waste, reducing, reduce and reuse and become a circular economy, right? And then also we need to work with scientists, everything, when we talk about the environment and the climate change, we cannot, without referring to science. We have to work with science together to provide a natural-based solution for the city. It's win-win for everyone. I believe it's benefit for everyone. We will have, better quality of life, air quality, better water, better environment. And recently the government talking about the 5 years plan, right? So when I look at the plan, they were planning for the environment aspect. I want to say the government need to make more aggressive approach, and we need to treat environmental issue like we treat COVID, as serious. We need to work together. yeah, of course, it's easy to say, right? So we need to change our behavior, because if we do things like business as usual, I don't think we can make much impact. So we need to change, and that would be a positive change.
An issue of mindset, of collective action. Christine, Hanchin and joint cooperation in this new cooperation zone, how do you see it taking shape, seen from Hong Kong, and how to get it right in terms of at the end of the day, let's say by 2035, when you have all those goals to meet set forth by the central government, it would be great to have a green Macau Hanchin urban space, but how to get there?
I think you're absolutely right. You know, it's such an amazing opportunity for Macau, and of course for the Greater Bay Area, right? Because that's our region. Because you have this opportunity, I wonder whether you can persuade the policymakers to start by thinking net zero. Because you're going to have to plan, you're going to have to design this whole area in Hanchin. Now, if you just go and do it like you've been doing it in terms of building infrastructure and so on, by the time in another 10 years, you're not getting closer to net zero. So, as a thinking framework, as you plan and develop, and this applies to Hong Kong and other places as well, anything new that we're going to do, our starting point must be to think about net zero. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily know how to do that, but I think we have lots of professionals and knowledgeable people who can guide the government, guide the businesses, people who are going to provide the services for Hanchin. That if you now say what you want to do is you want net zero, right? That's what we're trying to get to. I think the professionals can come up with much better ideas than if you just say, oh, well, let's go and build it out.
Interesting, this idea of being ambitious, right, and tackling it at an early stage when you're launching and witnessing the development of this new urban space. David, Gonçalves, we're talking about shared resources, shared water resources, shared environmental resources. Of course, I'm talking about Hanchin, but we could also look at the new urban areas, the new land reclamation, Zone A, particularly in the case of Macau. It would be really important to get it right from square one.
Yes, of course, I would say that I agree with Christine that this is a great opportunity, I would say, for a case study that could be representative for the world. Because there are not many places in the world where you are given a new area from scratch to develop, and where you can think about it out of the box in a new way, and instead of trying to repair what has been done badly, just do it right from the beginning. So it's a great opportunity to do things right, and let's see what will happen in the coming years. What are the advantages that Macau can take from this partnership? Well, in addition to the area, for example, to have more recycling companies that is very hard to have in Macau, because the land and in Hong Kong also is very, very expensive, and labor is also very expensive. You can have, Christine also mentioned this, for consuming locally, we need space to produce stuff. So the things that we consume here in Macau are mostly imported. Almost everything is imported. And so this partnership could allow us to set up specific industries, in particular in case of the products that come from further away and have a higher environmental impact, and that we could try to start producing them more locally to reduce the environmental impact of those. Also, we talked about energy. Energy is the most significant issue that we need to tackle regarding emissions and climate change. And this also gives us an opportunity to have more area for clean energy production solutions, although it's tricky for different reasons, geographical, climate, and so on and so forth. It's hard to develop this kind of clean energy solutions here in this area. And this is why cooperation with Hanchin is probably not enough. We need to look at the Great Bay Area for some types of solutions, in particular in the area of energy production. But we can seek solutions to improve the amount of clean energy. I'm not sure if it's really clean, because even sun or wind energy has environmental costs associated to it, but let's forget that part for now, to produce energy that is better than what we are producing now. And of course, I would say that another big opportunity here is joining forces in research and technology development. This has been, and talked a lot in the academic environment, which is how things are going to develop in the near years. But of course, putting the brains of people of Macau, Hong Kong, and mainland China working together in the universities and in research institutes and in companies that can think about possible solutions for the future that improve the environmental profile of the region, I believe it's paramount. So we really need to go into that direction. And of course, I believe another area that is relevant is to have a very good integrated public transportation system. Well, again, the second biggest driver of emissions in Macau is the land transportation system after the energy sector. And we have an opportunity here if we develop a very efficient public transportation system to decrease the number of private transportation vehicles that people need. And this is the most efficient way to reduce emissions, is moving from fuel-based vehicles to electric vehicles is one first step, but it is much better to just forget our private vehicles and use public transportation, this in terms of environmental profile. So I would say that we should think about an efficient, and Hong Kong has a lot to teach in this respect, an efficient public transportation system for the whole region that integrates well and that people can move from one place to the other with ease and in clean energies. And finally, I would like to see that when this integration is done, that nature was not forgotten, and that we would be able to see green corridors and a significant proportion of green areas, not just for leisure, but also to protect the biodiversity that still exists in this part of the world. And again, it's another thing that we should think about it and do it well done now that we are developing this region.
That's right. Interesting points. And well, we've seen what scientists can do, and we're talking about COVID-19 in record-breaking time, the development of vaccines, of solutions. Quoting Annie Lau, that if we look at this as an emergency, and mankind has proved over and over again the ability to produce literally miracles with joint cooperation and effort, determination, and allocation of resources. We are now about to wrap up our talk, and I'd like to ask each one of you for a 1 minute final take to sum up something that you'd like to take, or you take as a sort of takeaway from this session. And if you want to throw in a suggestion of specific proposals, something practical that could be implemented and carried out, please go ahead. I would start with Benson Lam. Your final take and any suggestion, any proposal.
Because I really want to talk to that a small city. We can make some trial for the world. Even we make mistake, we can return. If our country made mistake, no way to go and return. So try for Macau, small city.
Thank you, Benson Lam. Annie Lau, your final take. Any suggestion? Anything that you would like to share with us, with our viewers, with the citizens?
So I would like to start from ourselves. We can do green in ourselves. First, don't waste food, do recycling, buy what you need, don't waste, support green economy, buy green. So yeah, everyone can make a difference. So start from ourselves today.
So think globally, act locally, so to say. David Gonçalves, your final take.
Well, this is not so much about solutions, it's more to reinforce an idea that I think I already mentioned, which is that if we really want to tackle these environmental challenges, we cannot decouple these from economic inequalities that we have in the world and from the population issue. So the population issue, I think, is going to solve itself. So the world population is going to stabilize very soon. But regarding economic inequalities, they have been decreasing when we compare the rich countries and the poor countries, but they are still extreme. And so when we talk about these kind of solutions to tackle environmental problems, if we look at poor countries, they just cannot do it because they don't have the money to do it. So, and of course, this is something that affects mostly the poor countries, but also people in the rich countries. I would say that one of the major ideas that has to be on the table when we talk about climate and environmental emergencies is economic inequality.
Interesting point. And I would end with Christine Law. Do we need a sort of global Green Deal to bring all these together?
Well, I think the so-called Green Deal, I think first of all, maybe we can all recognize that we have a date with destiny, 2025, 2060, right? Net zero, climate, carbon neutrality. It's a date with destiny. We have agreed to that. And to get there, we need to cooperate because we really don't all know exactly how to do it. And the only way to get there is by the combination of our capabilities. And lastly, if we did want a campaign, I think using food, it's a good one because China already has a Clean Plate 2.0 campaign. Hong Kong has had one. And we have also investors and owners of hotels and food businesses that invest in the whole region. So what I'm saying is there are people who have invested in your hotels and so on that also have hotels and restaurants in Hong Kong. So this is something that regionally, if we can inspire people to do it, because there's an individual component, right? You and I can all do much better, but our businesses can also do better, and it can be a legitimate regional campaign.
And with that, on that, would say that's plenty of food for thought. It's dinner time, and about to wrap up this talk. Thank you very, very much, our distinguished panel speakers, Christine Law, David Gonçalves, Benson Lam, Annie Lau. Really, really a pleasure having you all on this show, on this session, co-chaired by me and by Nelson Moura. We're from Macau News Agency and Macau Business Magazine. Thank you all. Special thanks, of course, as always, to Rui Cunha Foundation for the whole crew with us. We will be back soon, and most likely we will be bringing this conversation to a second installment in the coming months. So I hope to see you, looking forward to seeing you again, and thank you very, very much. All the very best. Good evening.